want to start recording of this so we can throw it up on the YouTube. And without further ado, if Bob, you want to unmute your mic. Bob Charpinski and Sam Davis are with us today. I will give you the floor. Start out maybe introducing yourselves, and we can go from there.
Thank you, sir. Can everybody hear me first of all? Thank you. My name is Bob Charpinski. I've been a police officer with the City of Binghamton Police Department for coming up on 16 years now. In December of 2013, I became the training director. And since then, my role has been to handle training within the department and handle training for officers that go outside of the department. Some of that training includes within the department our in-service program, which we do once a year, where every officer comes in off of the street and they will do 40 hours of training on various topics, on either state topics or federal topics that we're looking at across the country. And we also do this training with the Johnson City Police Department. So we'll have about 160 officers that go through that 7-week or 8-week long in-service program.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sam Davis. I got a couple different job titles, 15 years with the Broome County Sheriff's Office, 2 years with Binghamton University prior to that. I've also been an instructor at SUNY Broome since 2015. I've owned my own business now for 2 years, but been a subcontractor for various companies for 7 years prior to that. I'm not originally from this area. I moved here, I think in 1993. From the moment I moved here, it has been a great community. So since 93, I've done my best to try to give back as much as I can to the community. Take pride in everything that I do. Love the working relationship that I have with the other agencies, other directors and trainers in the area. So it's a great partnership, and we're here to serve.
All right, and I think one of the things that we'll do is if, Bob, maybe you want to start off with some of the general training that BPD does. I know Sammy sent to the collaborative a outline of some of the more specific training. For those who may know very little about the training process to both become a Binghamton police officer or as part of the Southern Tier Law Enforcement Academy, from the kind of the date of hire to annual in-service, if you kind of give us an overview. If anyone on the committee has questions, if there's a moment where you can jump in, feel free to do so. You can unmute yourself. Want to keep it an active conversation. Want to make sure that we have Bob and Sam have enough time to talk about what they need to talk about. But Bob, maybe you want to kick things off sort of on that, and then we'll move to Sam with some of the more specific training.
Yes, thank you. So once we have a prospective candidate that is hired by this department, we started this a couple years ago with sending them through a 2-week pre-academy. And during that 2-week pre-academy, we're looking to make sure that they are going to be physically fit for when the academy starts. And also, in my mind, I believe to be the strongest component there is to be mentally fit for what they're going to look to do for the next 20 years once they graduate the academy. After that 2-week process, the academy starts. And with the first 2 weeks of the academy, it's getting used to being in a paramilitary organization where we do a lot of drill, ceremony, procedures, movement in and out of the classroom. And we'll even begin to show them videos of incidents that happen throughout the U.S. at various times to really drive home the point that things can go bad and you have to be mentally prepared each and every day you put that uniform on and step outside these 4 walls here. From there, it moves into a classroom portion of it. And there's various topics that Sammy can go ahead and discuss on and along the time frame. I know with our academy here, we're closing in on 7 months now, correct? Like just over
31 weeks.
31 weeks that the academy here does. In my mind, this is one of the premier academies. I do have the opportunity to talk to other academies throughout the New York State. And this one is looked at as very high up on the scale of academies to attend. Hence the reason why we have departments from all the way up Jefferson County and all the way west as out near Jamestown that do come down to us and go ahead and utilize our academy. With our academy procedure, we do more time on certain topics than is required through the state.
Yep.
And then I'll let Sam talk more about the academy portion, but upon graduation, then they are turned on over to us. We take them in, and from there, we will go ahead and put them on FTO training to a time where the bosses and administration feel that this individual is good to go out on their own now. And then that's usually dependent on the individual, usually at the end of December, sometimes beginning of the new year. And that's usually the time frame we start to run our in-service program. So before I turn this on over to Sam, you talk about our in-service program here real quick. We've been running an in-service now ever since I can remember coming on the job back in 2005. And during that time frame, it's always been a 40-hour work week. So no matter what shift you're on, you are now going to be on a day shift Monday through Friday. Usually starts about 8 a.m., gets done about 1,600 hours, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And during that time frame, you're covering various topics to include any sort of recertifications. For example, TASER. We have a couple TASER units within the department, so we'll have to do TASER recertification for all the 95 officers that are certified within the department. We'll go through, because we have a police lockup, we'll have to go do per state, per Department of Corrections, we'll do training on suicide prevention, which is having the officers during their checks, if somebody's out back in our care, to make sure that everything is good with them and to really look for signs if something was possibly bad was going to happen to them, that they may be possibly thinking about suicide. And if that was the case, there's certain protocols in place that we want to enact at that moment in time. We do first aid training, disability awareness training. We do training, mental health training, which includes de-escalation, talking to people that are out there. We do reality-based training, where we will put officers in as real situations as we possibly can, minus any weapons there. And we'll look at their decision-making process and without a doubt, push them down the right road if there seems to be an issue. We do, let's see, what else? We take care of cleaning their firearms during that time, armoring their guns. And I have our current in-service schedule right in front of us. We will go ahead and do defensive tactics. We do have a new less lethal device called the Bowler Wrap, so we do a recertification process on that. A new topic that has come on up are red flag laws and extreme risk protection orders. Our use of force training is done by one of our assistant chiefs, and that is a 4-hour process done on Wednesday morning. And that also ends up covering our First Amendment issues. We have a DWI updates that we're talking to the officers about this year, along with officer wellness, and that's covering topics from financial, mental, and physical. Our intel division will come in and do a presentation on what is going on with our intel. Our chief of police comes in and does a state of the department address, affords the officers that are in the classroom at the time to ask any questions about what's going on with the department. We are doing a principled policing, which is a new topic that the state put on out recently. And with that topic right there, we are doing a 2-hour principled policing section of it. So all the officers that are in service, Binghamton and JC, are getting that topic right there. And the best way I can describe principled policing is the golden rule. Treat people how you expect to be treated when you're out there dealing with the public. You want to talk about the academy?
So before I get into the academy, a little bit more specific, a lot of you I don't know, and you probably don't know me. As I said, I came to the area in '93, and just like a lot of people who are new to the area, maybe you are exposed to things that a lot of people are not. Before I got into this field, I was stopped like a lot of other people. I had contact with law enforcement officials that maybe I didn't agree with. Okay, so I think this is important in kind of understanding where I come from and why I do what I do. So with that being said, that contact occurred more and more and more. Then eventually I had to kind of self-check myself and think, why is this contact happening and what can I do to kind of make a difference for me? Not speaking of anybody else, I had to think about me. So it was about that time when I decided the last time I was dealing with somebody, I remember thinking to myself, I could do this job better and I could do this job the way that I think it should be done. So it was about that time, 2003, when I started taking civil service tests, and then I ended up getting into the field. To fast forward a little bit, when I went through the academy, it was an experience because I was a little bit older, I was a little bit wiser. I ended up meeting some people that I thought were certainly people that were important and had a mindset like I did. So I decided to transfer to where I did, to the sheriff's office. It has been one of the best decisions I've ever made. Like a lot of people when they go through life, I can tell you this, I always felt that I could offer more, not just to being a deputy, but to law enforcement as a whole. There's a lot of people in life that never reach that moment in life, but I can tell you that I did. And I realized that early on, that teaching was my power. Teaching was something that I was passionate about. Teaching was something that I was decent at. So early in my career, I was getting the opportunity to teach. So fast forward again, 2015, I got a chance to get promoted to director of training. I thought it was kind of cool, thought it was nice. At the time, I didn't realize the impact that I could have on all of these new police officers coming on the job. Think about it. In our area, we are a minority. I understand that. You understand that. But also, most of these officers do not have an immediate supervisor for 6 months. That was me. That is me. So every time we get a new wave of officers in, I realize what the importance of that initial contact is. I realize what impact I can have on them from the early onset of their careers. I take pride in that. I've been married for this year, it'll be July, it'll be 29 years. Wonderful wife who supports me, who has been good to me. She has been my support. I have 3 wonderful, wonderful children. 28-year-old daughter, 25-year-old son, and an 18-year-old son who's now attending at Ithaca. That is my whole life. So everything that I do on this job, I also have to think of my family, which I do. So running the academy, the required hours is about 650 hours that's mandated by DCJS. That varies every year. Based on what's going on in society, they lay down to minimum hours. We historically have gone above and beyond that. Our average academy now, we put on about 1,208 hours, 1,208 hours. And that's not consistent every year. We try to stay around 31 weeks just for the sake of having to get officers on the street. So again, we try to accommodate all the agencies, understand the shortage that they need, but we also reach out and we kind of, listen, we have our pulse on what's going on. So me at the academy level, I try to make changes based on what's going on in the community. Not just because DCJS said so, because it's important to me. That is my responsibility. So I try to do that, keep my pulse on what's going on in the communities. And again, we're bound by jurisdiction, but still we have a close relationship and we try to help each other out. So more importantly, it's not just us in law enforcement. I want to make that very clear. And I have made that very clear from the moment that I came on this job in 2015. I have historically invited community members to the academy to partake in training, experts in the field from the community to come into the academy and partake in training, because I understand that this is not just about law enforcement, it's about the community effort. Because when the officers aren't working, they're still part of the community. So I'm not going to throw out names, but every year in multiple different blocks, I have extended the opportunity for people from the community to come into the academy. And I can honestly tell you this, some have refused, some have completely not responded to me, some have come in, and honestly, I think that they've wasted an opportunity to help combine and unite us as a group. But no fault to theirs. Listen, it's a difficult task. It's a very, very difficult task. But I continue to try to do this every single year. Which brings me furthermore to the point of the training that we're talking about today. Years ago, Bob came to me and we had this conversation because, listen, him and I talk. I think he's considered a friend. We do primarily the same job. So anything I can do to support him and help him, I will. So we understand the importance of this particular topic. So when he originally started talking to me 4 or 5 years ago about this, I didn't offer my services. Because again, we always try to outsource these things and try to bring somebody in who might have a good perspective. The only thing I can tell you is this. You should talk to the officers who have been through prior trainings and get their feedback. I'm not trying to say I'm any different, but realistically, anybody who sat through a class, it's you that should give feedback that makes an instructor evaluate and make changes to the class. That's all I can say. I don't know. So I have recommended a few people to him, and they've utilized some of the people that I know from my past. And like I said, that's up to you guys. That's up to the officers who decide what kind of training they got. So fast forward to more recently, it was a little bit more difficult for him to put this together. And again, I've been teaching in the civilian world for quite a long time. Outside of the academy, I've been teaching all over the United States. I've been to California, I've been to Minnesota, I've been to Friendship, New York, I've been to Delhi, I've been to Kentucky, I've been to Florida, Texas, I've been just about everywhere. And all I can say is I am very professional when I speak. I do my research and I do it to the best of my ability. One of the main things I strive for in my classes is to make people want to respond and share in the classes. Yes, we educate, but what's more important is people open it up, and especially on a topic like this, making them feel comfortable enough to share a story. Maybe it's something they didn't experience, maybe it's something that they dealt with, or maybe it's something they've seen, but the idea is getting people to open up. Unfortunately, I think we all know that this is a topic a lot of people are afraid to talk about. 2020 was rough for us. And I have spoken to a few local leaders. And again, it's a team effort. So when it comes to this class, because again, we decided, he offered, and we decided to move forward with this. And I told them, this is not from a perspective of an officer. It's a perspective of a Black man, of a Black parent, of a Black husband. I want to make this as meaningful, as impactful as I could, which comes down to how I pretty much laid this out. Listen, two hours, what I find is not enough. You know what I mean? But again, I understand the workings of in-service and trying to work on the schedule. So when he said that to me, I wanted to create something and hit all the topics that I think were meaningful, that I could make impactful, and try to draw as much conversation out of these officers as I possibly could. So, you know, starting off with those basics, you know, you talk about prejudice, you talk about discrimination, stereotypes, and the microaggressions. Most people truly know what they mean, but getting them to elaborate and discuss on them and maybe bring in some of their personal relationships, situations, instances they've been in, that's more important and impactful. One of the things I try to do, I can give you 100 stories about me personally in these situations. And when I tend to share mine, that usually gets people want to open up and share theirs. Because I can always take my uniform off. I can't take my color off. So I can tell you personally, situations I've been in this community, the community I live and breathe in with my family that I've been through. And so I try to bring those experiences to the classroom to get people open up. You know, so some of the group activities have been extremely impactful. Again, I would suggest that you read some of the evals and kind of get the feedback from them. I can tell you, I think it's good, but it's really the officers who are sitting through the class, and I make changes as we go. And as I said, listen, my job is to provide a service, a good service that's hopefully going to impact the way they're dealing with the community. So after going through all those, you know, we really get into culture to make them sure understand. So we talk about some of the more important symbols that are coming up in the news every day. You know, you see people posting flags, you know, KKK flags. Those are symbols. So we have discussions based on things like this. We talk about some of the differences just in language. But once we really get into that, I make the guys and girls really understand. We as officers are in such a position to meet a lot of people, a lot of diversity in the communities that we're serving. And so I'm trying to get the officers to take advantage to learn from the community members that they're out there serving every single day. From what I do, I never would have had the connections I have if it wasn't for the job that I do. And I try to take advantage. As you can see, I like to talk. But that's how we learn. That's how we learn. We're here to protect and serve, but having a meaningful conversation when it's feasible in the community is going to help us learn and generate. So that's a huge part of it, and then when we talk about diversity, listen, there's different levels to diversity. I know we all know the basics. You talk about your race, gender, national origin, your ethnicity. All of those things are the buzzwords. But I really try to make people understand that diversity it's a lot deeper than that. Diversity is even something inrooted in you, what your values are. What your personal traditions are. When I sit there with him, I believe that we have a lot of the same core values. We're on the same path and we have the same objectives in life. And that's what I try to get people to understand. And then I shift on to power, because that's an important topic when it comes to law enforcement. So when I ask these guys, do you consider yourself having power? And ultimately, no matter what they seem to think, I bring it around to me, the power of an officer is power of judgment. We pass judgment on people every single day. So I try to make them understand how important it is to use that discretion and use that judgment wisely. That, to me, is probably the most powerful thing that an officer can do. You know what I'm saying? So getting them to understand that is their true power, passing that judgment on people and understanding it. So naturally, when we go into things like privilege, as I noted in the lessons plan, I'd use the Peggy McIntosh, questionnaire. And again, everything's abbreviated. It's 2 hours. I try to be as impactful as I possibly can, but I can tell you this, most of the classes I speak to, again, they can relate to all those questions. If you're not familiar with it, I would look up the Peggy McIntosh and look at some of the questions that they ask about white privilege. It's no fault to theirs. So I try to make them understand that's not your fault. We're all born to where we are. And the idea behind the training is not to make anybody feel bad, but it's to make them understand that the people that you're serving, they don't have the same privileges that some people do. The majority of the officers are white, Caucasians. The majority of the people I've ever presented at in all these states, Caucasians. So I really appreciate the fact that I get to stand in front of people, to share my concerns, to try to make them look at something a little bit different, to make them have a conversation with me, and then hear other people in the class say, man, I would have never known that about you. God, I never looked at it that way. That's the way training should be in my eyes. Again, I'm not saying I'm the best trainer, but I'm saying I got a different viewpoint on it, and I enjoy doing it. And if there's some feedback that I may get, then I will make changes to make sure that my point gets across or somebody's understanding is what I'm saying. Realistically, again, we go down to recruitment, because again, that is one of the things that we're talking about, being diverse in law enforcement. Some of you probably don't know that teaching at the college, I started doing that really as a good recruiting base for me. Started in 2015. And I think that some of these people at Binghamton, they know and understand. A lot of people think they want to go work at another particular agency, but I have hand-walked people down here, met with Bob and met with a particular chief and said, this person, I would put my name on. They come from Binghamton. They should be employed at Binghamton. I could have very well took them to the sheriff's office. But I understand the dilemma that we're all in or about this recruitment phase. And I can tell you, I run the physical fitness exam on my half. 7 years I've been doing it. I can count on one hand how many minorities that we've gotten to come in and get through that test. I understand. So one of the things I'm trying to do is do my part, is go out into the community to help educate the public and people on how to take civil service, because it's important to me. I would love to be able to go and teach a class and see more people like me. There's nothing that would make me feel better about, because I might have had a hand in that. We need it. It's a lot harder than most people think. So we kind of talk about that, and I kind of make sure the officers understand that's not their fault. But what they can do is, when they're out there working, educate people on where to find civil service and how to take it. That's really all these officers can do. That's different for every level that you go. But for the officers I'm speaking to primarily, it's all of our responsibility to portray yourself and to handle yourself, to show yourself in a very professional manner, and to want people to take this job. We got to get that trust back. And so I always tell them that. So communication is the other part of that. 90% of what we do is talk to people. And I love it because you can change a person's mind by having a good, legitimate conversation with them. And I try to do it as much as I possibly can. I didn't have to come down here and speak, but I thought, why would not take that opportunity? If you're allowing me to train some of these officers. Most of the officers here, they know me. They know how I operate. They've seen me. Listen, I take pride in what I do. And every day I learn. Every single day I learn from community members and the people that I'm teaching in classes. When it comes to the LGBT plus community, for us, it's another diversity angle. But when we're dealing with people in the community, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So I, again, break it down to doesn't matter. Treat that person with utmost respect. Do what you are supposed to do. Treat them like it would be a family member. And if you can't do that, treat them like you would want to be treated. You know what I'm saying? So we kind of talk about this, and ultimately, it comes back down to the symbol of Lady Justice, just like Officer Charpinski said. Listen, just and fair is what we strive for. It's a tough process, but nothing in life is easy. This is certainly not easy. And I would like to think that I'm up to the challenge. I would like to think that I'm doing my part and trying to do everything I can. And I'll continue to change and try to do whatever I can to make things better. But read the evaluations, not just from mine, but from past instructors as well. And you might, it'll definitely shed some light on how they think about the certain trainings and if they felt comfortable in classes. Because if nobody feels comfortable in the classroom, they're not going to speak, they're not going to share, possibly not going to change. Sorry, a little long-winded.
No, that's been great. A couple things, and maybe before we open it up to the whole discussion, I just want to make sure that everyone on the call is aware of. When you said DCJS, that refers to the Division of Criminal Justice Services with New York State. They're the agency of New York State that accredits law enforcement agencies, is sort of the bureaucratic head of all local law enforcement. That's kind of an accurate statement. You also mentioned FTO. And Bob, could you just give a 10-second explanation of what FTO is, field training?
Yes, sir. FTO stands for Field Training Officer. So an FTO will be utilized when we get a new recruit or new individual with this department. We'll put them in a vehicle, a marked unit with an FTO. And the FTO is basically there as a teacher, as an instructor, as a guide. Okay.
And then my understanding is that that field training officer has input into when the recruit, new officer, can then go out on their own in their own car. Some of them are quick learners and others take a couple months in order to get on the road.
That is correct, sir. There is paperwork that is filled out after each shift, after each individual FTO interaction is done. So all that is logged and tracked.
Okay. And talk specifically about use of force training, whether it's at the academy level or an annual in-service. I think there's been a lot of discussion, certainly nationally, regarding the use of force continuum, de-escalation techniques, lethal force, non-lethal force. Walk me through is in much detail as possible about use of force training from the recruitment stage to when someone's actually an officer and in service.
Yeah.
So again, knowing that this is one of the most important topics, because again, this is not something that an officer is really going to have a chance to pick up a book and read. Either they know it or they don't. So from early on in the academy, we have these discussions and everything is kind of broken up in blocks of instruction, because ultimately a lot of it's going to lead back to that one defining moment where they have to make that decision. So they'll have all kind of law classes, a CPL, criminal procedural law classes broken out throughout, and a lot of times we'll try to bring in experts to teach it. So like the last 2 years, we've actually leaned on Michael Puckett. He works for DCJS. He kind of developed the use of force course. So he's actually came down and taught the class, and I co-teach it with me, and then I'll kind of just jump in with him to fill in the gaps, but he's phenomenal. So we've kind of leaned on him. But listen, you can't learn all of that just in a classroom lecture base. I know that it's a lot of information. So like Officer Charpinski said, we've kind of leaned on other blocks of instruction. So if we're doing professional communications, they changed that to an 8-hour block, because whenever you're talking about use of force, you're using communication just about the entire time, at least you should be. So during blocks like professional communications, we're asking instructors, and we're doing it ourselves, creating little drills, little scenarios, not necessarily blown out hands-on, but it's like building baby steps. After you sit through a lecture for use of force, and actually the time frame at the academy level is 12 hours. 12 hours of use of force. So it's kind of broken up, and then you kind of piggyback off of that and you kind of go into other blocks. So it's always discussed, it's kind of reviewed in most of these classes. So when you go to professional communications, it's brought up. So then when you go to firearms training, it's brought up almost daily. Mm-hmm. And then when you go to less lethal, you have different blocks like taser training. That's 2 days of training right there. So it's discussed again right there. And then you have OC training, which is another 8 hours of training. So everything kind of broken up in blocks, but then they start melting together as the training progresses. Again, everything is about baby steps. So then ultimately, when we get down to that, it comes down to defensive tactics. We put that to the end. And again, we only teach it, again, defensive tactics. It's kind of last resort. We teach some of the most safest and updated control techniques there is. And again, that whole program was revamped in 2018 by DCJS. So we model everything from them in that sense. The training staff that we use at the academy level, again, is far and wide. You're talking about the academy has grown every year since then. So we try to bring in as many instructors as we can to do as much practical application, as much training hands-on as we possibly can. Because if you're going to do something wrong, training is the place to do it. And so we primarily try to overload it as much as we can. Then even after all that, we do at the end of our academy, which is 2 weeks of training. We used to do 3, but again, it's hard to staff it. We call it reality-based training. We take a lot of the situations that you see worldwide, and we try to recreate them. We're not selective, but we take things that we want to get a good outcome. We want them to learn. So we spend day after day recreating these scenarios, and we use not live weapons, but we do simunitions, more or less a high-powered paintball. Very effective because it creates that anxiety in the recruits. But that environment is great because now if they make mistakes, again, they're going to feel the sensation. We can kind of talk them through it. So it's been wonderful. We've been doing it here before I even got on the job. So you're talking well over 17 years. Believe it or not, DCGS just mandated that portion recently. 3 years ago.
Yeah, recently.
And so that just kind of tells you how far ahead of the curve our area is. And that's why one of the reasons we might be attracting so many people from other areas. When I went through the academy in 2003, you're talking 20 people. Now, every year we've grown. So right now, our academy numbers are looking at 60, 62. And every year we've increased our numbers. So I'm very happy because I'm pretty much one that does the paperwork and a few classes, but it's a team effort between the local agencies with the instructing staff and also people like DA Korchak. And this year I'll be inviting Mike Baker into the classroom. Again, we try to lean on the experts in the area as much as we possibly can.
From the in-service standpoint of use of force, you're looking at the officers are getting updates on use of force in the TASER research program, the BOLA wrap research, the 4-hour use of force block that's instructed by one of our assistant chiefs. And majority of the information that's coming in from that 4-hour block, the assistant chief has been able to gather from a use of force summit that's usually put on out in Connecticut, but due to COVID last year, it was remote. And that is through the Eric Daigle Law Group. Great company, great summit. In fact, talked to the sergeant over here about going out and taking a look at that right there for a use of force program, because Eric Daigle puts on a great summit and the information that's coming out is always up to date on what's going on across the country, border to border, coast to coast. And you're also getting use of force in firearms and reality-based training. So a lot of the days and a lot of the programming, the instruction that the officers are getting overlaps Monday through Friday.
And Bob, maybe you can talk about that BPD's training is not a static training. It's not the same training that you had when you joined the force, and it's updated on an annual basis in big ways. Can you just kind of discuss some of that, some of the process of researching the top experts, the new strategies, best practices from other agencies, and training our officers on that? I'd have to imagine that a large portion of the curriculum each year is updated, correct?
Correct. So what's going on is, as Semi talked about with the academy, he's always looking at and trying to stay on top of the issues that are going across this country. Same thing here within this department. When it comes to planning our in-service, we've been paying attention to what's been going on the previous year. So if there's a hot button topic, we're going to look to bring that in for our in-service program. We will go ahead and develop a curriculum. By curriculum, we'll reach out to the academy, we'll reach out to the state, we'll reach out to professionals or professionals within that field to go ahead and get a better understanding in what we need to, so we can go ahead and present that information to the officers during our in-service program.
At this point, I'll open up anyone who wants to unmute themselves, ask a question of Sam. It looks like Tanya Thompson. Go ahead.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. First of all, thank you, Simi, for that thorough explanation of what's offered in the academy. And again, I'm understanding that the academy would be something that would be onboarding our police officers versus in-service training, which would be annual for all officers to participate in. And I just want to ask a couple of clarifying questions. So, you know, the 2 hours that you sent ahead of time covered, it appeared to be like the heart of discussions around implicit bias, white privilege, and so on. Is that correct? So it's 2 hours each year, and is that every year that all police officers are exposed to that?
When it comes to in-service, there's no mandates on that. A lot of us who are scheduling our in-services, we again, depends on what's going on in society, what are the hot topics, and again, working with whoever's going to be doing a presentation, what they need to cover it. So that kind of fluctuates every single year.
So it may not necessarily be that same content each year.
No, not at all.
Correct.
And then also you mentioned with the use of force training, you know, and I'm the superintendent of the Bing schools, and so, you know, intimately familiar with ongoing trainings that are required, as well as our commitment to professional learning in the district. When we look at our trainings, we try to bring everything in that has that lens of being culturally responsive. Is that being considered? Meaning, when you're bringing a trainer in to look at use of force, they're doing it with that culturally responsive lens, or they're using a traditional, you know, use of force type of training?
No, the information that's being brought in is going to be up to date, most current information by that instructor, bringing it to the individuals.
Okay. So we experience this. I'll just give you an example. We have crisis prevention and intervention training that we offer all of our staff. And then we have crisis response teams that go through that training. And when I was researching programs to bring in, I specifically looked for one that did the training with a culturally responsive lens, so that when we're looking at the responses of or behaviors of individuals, whether they be other adults or students or in our care, that one of the first questions we asked ourselves was, why are they behaving this way, as opposed to thinking about what our response to that behavior is. And that's the example of like being culturally, you know, responsive. So that's why I asked that question. And I think the next question is probably maybe more for you know, Binghamton PD. And also with good training, I mean, the work that we're talking about that's so critical is a shift in mindsets. It's a shift in belief systems. It doesn't take place, as you know, from sitting for 2 hours and listening to it, or even hearing stories or having conversations about it. And trying to open up individuals' beliefs takes time. You know, we look at very different configurations to have those honest and open conversations, Sammy, as you referred to as being so critical. So that's one piece of it. The second piece of that is to see how it's put in operation. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit to how you check for understanding, meaning they've gone through this training. How do you know it's being actually operationalized out in the field?
I'm glad you brought that question up, because when I went to the procedural policing, procedural justice training, I went to the lead instructor of the class and I asked him, I said, what's your litmus test for this? How do we know that this is working? And he said to me, what you want to do is you want to do the first section of procedural justice and then give it about a year to 2 years and then come back and do procedural justice 2. And what you're doing in that time frame is you're looking at how many complaints your department is bringing in. How many uses of force are they bringing in? Is that number dropping or is that number increasing? So that's going to be our litmus test right there.
So is that information that the department currently tracks to see, or is this something you're looking to put into place?
Could you broke up on that last
Sorry,
one.
is this something that you currently are doing or you're looking to put that in place?
The department tracks uses of forces and complaints.
Right, so then are you correlating that with individuals and their engagement in the training? And if there's some kind of a correlation, do you then, work with those individuals more?
When we come up with this training for our in-service program, we'll get together with I'll get together with our administration, and our administration has those numbers right there, and they're right on top of things. So they'll let us know, hey, we need to do this or we need to do that right here. We need to get the training going this way right here.
Okay, so again, I'm just going to use an analogy in the school systems that would be similar to me looking at, course failure rates in a particular course and saying we need some more support for this particular department, right? Who needs more training on maybe the curriculum or instructional strategies. But then we go deeper. We look at the results of each individual teacher and then look to see how we need to remediate the teacher, right? Or train the teacher differently to meet those needs of those students. So it sounds to me like you're at that level of how do we change the overall professional learning, right, for the department, or do more of something or less of something in response to the data, as opposed to down to the individual police officer's evaluation level.
I think it's
Evaluated every year.
Yeah. First of all, the officers get evaluated every year. And if there is an officer that is, for lack of a better term, red flag, meaning that they're having higher incidence uses of force, that officer obviously is going to be brought in and talked. But as a department as a whole, they're going to be looking at those numbers and determining, okay, we need to take the training down this level right here.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me? If you don't mind, I can just speak to that real quick.
That'd be great.
As far as
Thank
use of
you.
force. Sorry, I'm in a bad spot. If you can hear me okay. Just to clarify to Tanya's question too, we do track specifically to officers and all that. It's part of our number set, but it's something that I particularly can look at individually one-on-one. And just, we look at, okay, is somebody a lot higher than someone else and that kind of thing. But then we also have to look at all the other factors involved, because we track where they're working and stuff like that. And you can see where, for instance, someone who works in a very high crime area on night shift or something may have higher somebody that's working in a slower area. So we get the individuals, we're also looking at all the other factors. Is there possibly issue? Is there the fact that they're always working in a certain zone and a certain time? Are they a busier worker or someone who doesn't do as much? So there's all those other factors that I personally get to look at along with the chiefs and stuff that we continually keep track of and look at. If that kind of helps answer the question a little bit.
Yeah, it does. I think it also may lean towards, if you have individuals who are working in those types of environments, that they may need more support, right? So I'm not suggesting that pointing fingers here. It's just, I would not like to think that because they have higher rates because they're working in areas of higher crime, that's a piece of it. But to your point, the data tells a story. So you have to look deeper and understanding, if we're having more complaints in that area, why is it occurring, for example? It's not. So thank you.
Nicole?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nicole had her hand up, then Brian will get to you.
I'm having trouble figuring out how to get my hand up on this
Okay.
screen, so maybe you can pull me in next. Thanks.
Okay. Nicole, go ahead.
Firstly, I would have loved to have heard the presentation in its entirety, but I'm at work, and I didn't have notice about this meeting. I would, however the planning goes folks, this is really, I have to say, first and foremost for organizers, as someone who is truly wanting to be here and be present in every part of this collaborative, this is a concern for the community. So for me, who's at work and the meeting changes, especially when I'm asking questions and requesting information, this is a concern. I'm just going to ask that we really do a better job of this, because I could have been here if we, if there had been time to plan, if we had known. And this doesn't feel inclusive in this. I think this is important because it's happened just here. So this is not, it's not a public forum. This is important that we be inclusive even to the collaborative members, because I represent an important part of the community that wants to be a part of this presentation. Thank you to the presenters for presenting the information that I had questions about in regards to the cultural competency pieces of the training. I don't know the presenters, everybody, but I will just say that my primary responsibility at Binghamton University, and it has been for many years, is to train the campus on this very thing. So I'm just curious to know who does this part of the training. I ascertained, as I heard coming in, that the cultural competency or diversity and inclusive pieces are part of several trainings. And if that's not correct, go ahead and correct that piece, and just tell me who does the training and how often does that happen?
So this year we brought in Sammy Davis from D5 to go ahead and do a block on cultural diversity. And he is teaching on Tuesday mornings. So he came in this morning and taught his 2-hour block.
So Sammy, you also teach in the Sheriff's Department, in the academy, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and how often do you teach this? So each officer gets what, 2 hours? Is that what it is? Or how often does this happen?
I believe I sent this out in the email. Every year at the academy, the recruits, it's mandated minimum 6 hours. We do an 8-hour block every year at the academy. So obviously, when we're doing our in-service schedule for experienced officers, not new recruits, we do our in-service once a year. So once a year, and I'll be honest with you, it's not on the schedule every single year. Just like he said, our hands are tied to the amount of training that we're allotted every single year due to staffing, due to funds. Like I said, there's so many factors that come into play. So they do 40 hours down here. So they set whatever time they feel allotted for it. And they made that decision and they gave me a number and I said I could work with that. All right. So every agency does things a little bit differently when it comes to that.
So let me offer, and again, yes, I'm looking at the information that you did send in the email. So let me offer some insight / concerns about it. Essentially, the activities and information that is here is things that come out of our training, but it's dated. It's really old material. I probably did this in 2009, 10 at the university, right? So that's the first piece of it. The second piece, I'll just share my own experience in working in an in-service with the Binghamton Police Department in 09, 10. We were called in from an in-service at the university. The BPD had, they were doing this in-service where, we got about 2 hours for over about, maybe it was something like 10 to 13 weeks, and to cover the entire force at the time in terms of working with them. It was a training, it was called. Essentially what the police department asked of the institution was they wanted a presentation that uncovered the Multicultural Resource Center. At the time I was, the director, off-campus college, which works very closely with BPD and other agencies in the community around the institution. In addition to the Office of Greek Life, in addition to Dean of Students Office. And the presentation that we presented, they were very specific on what they were looking for, which was they wanted to know what our student population looked like, what percentage of our student population, came in from all parts of the world, essentially, the standards were for Binghamton and where they lived in the community. And really a special interest to the police department at the time was what happens when some type of crime or a student at Binghamton University commits some type of crime in our general community. How do they see punitive implications? How do they face either suspension or expulsion on campus for something that happened off campus? So they're already dealing with the police department externally, but what happens to them on campus? And so we went through this presentation, and then Greek Life was also a part of it, because a lot of the calls that were coming in were, our Greek organizations having large scale events off campus, that sort of thing. And so we did this presentation, and we did it for about 13 weeks. And something arose in the city. There was some case, and race was involved in the sense that a complaint was made to the Binghamton Police Department in regards to unfair treatment to community members who happened to be African American, Black, and there were concerns about it. Complaints came through, and then in the presentation that the chief made at the time was that someone raised a concern about what training looked like for the police department. And essentially what he said in the presentation was that we received cultural competency training, a diversity presentation from Binghamton University. And of course, the backlash to those of us that do the work on campus was there was no such thing, right? There was no such presentation that happened. And so the concern for me is that the in-service is an opportunity to request very specifically what the department wants to know, but it's presented in another way, and it can be politicized. And so for me, I'm very, very, very concerned about what true cultural competency diversity training actually looks like for law enforcement, because I do it. And that's what the department said that they received, when in fact that was not the case at all. And so if that was a cultural competency training for that year, I know that there have been several years that last that there was no such training, right? And so my concern for my organization and the community folks that I represent is, what does training really look like? And can we truly, right, trust that the department is actually training itself, right? So this is a concern. So you say, and this is a consulting group, which is, well, I have one of those too, because, well, when you do it full time as your job, yes, you can do it other places and train other people. So I'm concerned because the same folks that are doing the training are also doing the consulting, and I'm concerned about the optics of that. And so my specific questions is, what should, if anything, needs to change in the wake of there being a request for change? What needs to change about the in-service or the trainings in the academy? So, and before you answer that, I will just add that my concern is that there is a lot of hours, 2 hours for cultural competency, but there is 12 hours for use of deadly force, 4 hours for taser training, a lot defensive tactics training on top of that. And, my proposal essentially is that most officers don't ever fire their weapons, right? So are we, and I want you to manage that as well. Are we really doing a service to the community and to law enforcement with an excessive use of training in the times that we have, whatever the time is allotted, to train officers, right, in the use of force, when in fact we could, if they spend more time in a diverse city like Binghamton, could we train them differently? So I apologize, that's several questions in one, but things I'd like you to consider is, in the response. Thank you.
Nicole, thank you for your comment. So back in, you said you came in 2009 and 2010. We had Dr. Noel Shattuck come in 2015, 2016, and 2017 to go ahead and instruct to our officers here. It's definitely a real challenge, and we certainly do need more resources within the department. And we would welcome any assistance at all.
in the shortage of having resources, right? In the shortage of having resources, Bob, here's my question to you is, if you don't have any more resources, but you do have a set schedule of time to train officers, would you not consider changing the amount of time that you do deadly force training, right, to training people to deal with the community, whether that is in cultural competency, that's in, minimizing, a situation, or de-escalation tactics, or, you know what I mean? There's a series of things that we could do in short of having more money. Can we simply use the time that we have and the resources that we have to do things differently?
Bob, if you don't mind, let me jump in here a second and
Please, sir.
address some of Nicole's questions, because I think that's a fair question. But one of the things that we're trying to do is to, where there's agreement and consensus and where it makes sense, to increase resources. So I would think in our conversations with Chief Zukoski, we shouldn't necessarily be looking at the resources as finite. And if Bob and Sammy are saying that they want additional resources might be time, additional resources might be money. These are the things that we're supposed to be looking at right now. And so instead of looking at it as a finite, well, we have X amount of hours and let's shift around the amount of hours that are dedicated to various topics. I would say that if the issue is money, then we will come up with more resources, so that we don't have to make cuts or sacrifices and pit two different topics, against each other. If we need more money, if we need to bring in, more people, more training, et cetera, then that's a resource issue. Then that's where the chief and I would have conversations about how do we address that. I don't know that we want to go down the road of saying, okay, let's start reducing the amount of training that we're doing in other areas so we can do more training in this area for a net gain of no extra time. I would look at if we're identifying a deficiency in an area and we'd like to invest more in that particular area, which I'm certainly not opposed to, then I would say to Bob and Sammy, how do we do that? What is the plan or recommendation from a training standpoint that we can help support at the administrative level to put more resources so that we can accommodate everyone's common goal? And that would be, I think, the approach that I'd like to see with that moving forward. And Chief Zukoski, I don't know if you want to jump in and add anything, or if that is, I've reflected your point on that as well.
Well, I agree with you, Mayor. Once Sammy nor Bob brought up that the state mandates a lot of that stuff in that 40 hours, we can't play with those numbers. It's required by the state each year that we do that training. So part of the issue is time. And unlike Nicole suggested, we can't just start switching things around. There is some flexibility, but Bob, jump in if I'm wrong. We go over that schedule with Assistant Chief Ryan also, that we have very little, if you want to call it, free space that's not mandated by the state during those 40 hours.
But from, speaking just from the city of Binghamton standpoint, if we want to put additional training and resources outside of, the training academy or in service, we certainly could do that. And there's what the state guidelines are. And as I think you articulated, the state dictates, what we need to do. And it's a baseline or a bare minimum, but we can do additional sorts of trainings or resources for our, BPD. And then, other law enforcement agencies, have to, make their own decisions about that. But that's something that, I'm certainly open to as well. And I think that's where the chief and I, have those conversations, but we rely on, the input from the people on the front line, the training instructors on, this is what we need. Like this is the plan. This is what we want to do. And then they come to us about, the funding for it. And, that's what we're supposed to do, is provide this stakeholder group is supposed to provide input from the outside and from the community. And our job is to help, make some of these things a reality.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mayor.
Let's see here. Brian, are you still on?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Go ahead.
That was a good, interesting conversation. Thank you. My questions are somewhat simple. Obviously, relative to our recruiting for minorities. What are we doing relative to that? And engaging potentially engaging at a younger level some of our students to engage in police possibilities for careers. What are we doing there? I know a few years ago we had a program that actually my brother Mark sponsored and came up with $2,000 for fireman training. Actually, I think it was paramedic training. And we had 4 students from Binghamton that were in there. That they didn't stay in there, but it was an expensive investment of about $4,000 between him and the fire union. And I'm not sure who else, maybe the city put in for that. But once again, that was an investment that really didn't provide any benefit because the kids didn't stay with the program. But I did notice last night up in Syracuse that they're actually have folks and they're trying to involve the men, women of color in engaging more in a observation with their fire department so that when they're of age, they can, get on the force. And that would also help that process acclimates them to the fire department and everything that goes on there. And they also provide assistance in terms of training to take the exam. Because I think that may be a part. I don't know how many minorities we have take the exam that end up qualifying. But I think that's important. And then the same could apply to firemen. And we need to hire people that are going to stay in our city. And that includes educators, the whole 9 yards. We need to rebuild our community. So one of the questions I have is, as part of the civil service exam and the follow-up to that, obviously there's a list, the mayor decides or the chief decides who's going to come from that list. Doesn't have to take the first one. Obviously, there's all those things that can come into play. But in terms of the list and the testing, and then the interview process that takes place before you bring them on to the department, and then the probationary period, as far as trying to define and extract from the individuals you're bringing on what the level of cultural competency through any exam questions or through on the job observations during that up until that probationary period. Are we focusing on cultural competency and the ability to communicate with folks and kind of put themselves, as I heard one of the speakers say, put themselves in the other people's shoes. So then I'd like just a comment, if I could. I know this is a long question, but a comment regards to since the gentleman speaking today is with the sheriff's department, and they put out a report already. I'd like to know if you were engaged in that report, and what is your opinion on the effectiveness and the quality of that report? Thank you.
I'll talk about our recruitment project right now. So every year we put it up on our social media feeds, and then when the officers are out in the community and they see good people that they believe to be good quality candidates, they're always talking to them. So that's done by word of mouth. So we have our social media platforms and by word of mouth. Sammy and I, he actually, this was his idea. He actually got with me. I got approval from my administration to have, I believe it's going to be in March. We're going to be getting together with a local community member and talk about the process to go through and we'll find out where the test is, take the test, and even talk about test prep as well. Years past, a year past, we did do a test prep during a recruitment, and this is something we can bring to the administration again to look to do a test prep for the test again. You want to talk about what we're looking to do?
Yeah, as I mentioned in my presentation earlier, listen, this is not an easy fix. And I would hope as a committee meeting group, you would be soul searching yourselves and trying to find ideas. We in law enforcement have been considering this a long time, what we need to do to bring more diversity to the table. And be honest with you, especially now, a lot of people don't want to do the job. By us going out, we're setting this date with one of the local churches in the community because it was suggested. And listen, we're going to offer it up if that's all it takes, and if we can get 1-2 people on the job, absolutely. It's one of these things that we're always trying to do to create new things. Given my position, I get emails all the time from students and people that I met in the community. The gentleman just texted me last night. Ahmed Abdallah. What can I do to get on the test and prepare? So I communicate with people all the time, trying to give that information. So the only thing we can do is be readily available and open to any suggestions that come to us. Like I said, we're actually going to be doing some advertising on one of the buses coming up here starting this week. It's going to run for 1 month about, the civil service test date and how to apply. So we're always open to suggestions. But again, if you go and look up at the numbers, the numbers just aren't there. The numbers just aren't there. And like I said, we're trying to do everything we can. So
Brian,
can I just add, if you could, and you said offer some suggestions. I think it would be helpful for you to engage with the school district community and have some sort. You could probably establish some sort of club or have mentors that are engaged with some of these students to change their mindset and show them what police work's all about, because if they read social media, nobody's gonna want to join the police department.
We have many internship programs, and again, now with COVID and also the possibility of people trying to misuse information, I've increased our internship program from 2 people to 7 to 8 before pre-COVID to encourage that. The ride-along program, listen, every agency in the city or in the county offers up ride-along programs, and a lot of people take us up on that. But we've even gone above that. Anybody wants to come, and I did it with a lot of my committee members. Listen, come to the sheriff's office and we'll sit down and have a conversation, give you a tour around the place. Again, we got to be very careful with doing that, but I know that I've done that a couple of times. So yeah, we're trying, but again, we'll do everything we can. And it's again time. These officers on the road really don't have time to be going into schools. So you talk about a dedicated person assigned to that, and that's way above our pay grade. But again, the SROs that are in the schools, and I'm sure they're doing a fantastic job. You got one on the board right now, I'm sure is making much contact. Absolutely. And our SRO, like I said, so they're there. It's just not happening at a fast enough pace. It's not.
Brian, let me jump in here a sec too, because Brian, I would say that increasing the diversity of the police department to become more reflective of the community. I mean, that's a shared goal. I mean, I think we all want that. We've all wanted that from day one, and I don't think there's anyone that would contest that, from in any viewpoint group or anything like that. That. We're bound by the state civil service law, in which we have to go by the test scores, and that has created some challenges over the course of the last several years. As Bob had mentioned, to encourage the diversity of applicants, we created a new website. I think that's what Bob was referring to, joinbpd.com, that has things that people can download, like civil service documents. You can do job openings, get in touch with BPD staff for tutoring and mentorship opportunities. But we need to connect with people long before that process, right? And that's the issue. And so that's where I think that there are opportunities to partner with the pastors, the school district, different advocacy organizations, so that we can better penetrate into the grassroots networks, into the community. Because by the time a list gets to me, as you indicated, Brian, I'm limited by what the top scores are. And so not only, getting people to sign up is not enough. You have to get people to sign up and score high so that they're reachable. And there needs to be a lot more work done before that standpoint. I think, one of the things that we're going to make sure that's in our plan, and that is a common theme from people who are making comments, is a better diversification of the police department. And we need to allocate funding and resources and come up with a strategy to do that. I share your position that there's probably better partnerships and relationships that we can do with the school district. I also want to just piggyback on Sammy's point that if you look at the numbers of people who sign up for the police exam in Binghamton, those numbers have over a 15-year period have dropped immensely. The number and volume of people applying, fewer women, very few minorities, fewer people in general. So it's a real issue that the community is going to have to look to deal with on a short-term and long-term basis. But we're committed to allocating funding, for that, and that has to be and will be one of the tenets of our plan that we submit to City Council.
Thank you, Mayor. Could I get a comment on the study that came out from Sam? Would that be appropriate?
Which one?
The sheriff's report that came out on.
The
under the same guise.
Broome County's, Broome
Yes.
County's plan. You're asking him whether or not he participated in it and what he thinks of it.
And what his feeling is on the effectiveness of that plan.
How good is their plan? Is what you're
So listen, I've been part of that committee since the beginning, and I can tell you this: the committee members that we met, I think we're all on the same page. We've had some great discussion. I can't speak on behalf of everybody else, but we put that plan out in agreement. So I think personally, I think it's good. I think it's a good place to start. I think we need to continue these conversations, but absolutely 100%. I think all of us committee members are supportive of it, and we think it's good, but we need to continue with that same kind of plan.
If I can just add to what
Thank
Sam
you for
had,
your response.
if I can add, I was on that committee with Sam. He was a vital part of it, and many people we had on the committee we got a lot of discussion going, and I can say that that I think is going to be a success. A lot of it because what Sam had done in providing the same perspective to us through the course of that he's done today. That's just my opinion.
Thank you, Mike.
Nicole, did you have your hand up from before? Was that a new? Oh, go ahead.
It was a new one, but I don't know if Pastor Williams has spoke at all. But I'll I have some quick comments.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so for me, the first piece is I wanted to say that if in response to the mayor's comments about adding resources for the purposes of training, and if we were to do that, right, I think I would recommend that there be some open bidding for that work. So that there are folks in law enforcement, for example, that nationally known trainers, and no, they're not cheap, but if you're going to increase the funding, there needs to be some efforts to go external. I imagine that there would be great concern that the optic of our department, we're looking for change, but our department is essentially training itself, is a concern when there's an increase of funding, more funding allotted. Can we bring in a different perspective, for law enforcement? So folks in law enforcement even, but there are some nationally known, researchers out there, and so I do think the training should be both. It should encompass both professionals in law enforcement and those that do the research on the work that they do. And that's out there. So I think that that's an important piece. And again, the goal is to increase and create some level of trust in the process of change.
Nicole, let me just answer that point. That I think we're open to that. I would just add that we've done that before. This is, it's not, you're implying that the process has historically always been a closed process, and that has not been the case. And we've actually struggled to find national people to come in, and there are people out there that do cost a great deal of money, and we're not opposed to doing that. But I know that we have brought people in from the outside before, and we have also done in-service training on it as well. So I mean, I think we've done both. We're open to doing more. And so, if you have some recommendations or some input on that process, we would welcome it. But I just think it's important for everybody to know that we've done both, and we are, we're open to continuing to do that.
I'm not implying that it was, you know, that you haven't. I've trained and I'm considered an outside person, right? I'm not in the force. And, you know, I represent, the university was an outside entity that came in to do training. I'm saying that there are folks that this is all they do, right? Both in law enforcement and folks that research on them. And yes, if they're, you know, I don't know what the funding looks like, but if we do increase it in a space where we hadn't had that before, right? Because yes, there are some national names out there and they're expensive, but we hadn't had this before. And now, because there is this call for change, that means we're adding resources. And so if there's an opportunity to bring them now when we couldn't afford it before, I'm saying that that's something to be looked into.
And I appreciate that, but I just want you to know that we have allocated money before and had difficulties bringing people in.
I'll forward I'll forward.
So if you have recommendations or suggestions, we're open to them.
Yes. The other piece is in regards to the testing, test prep and recruitment. Most certainly, if there is, you know, if there are flyered information and information that we can to support those efforts, both electronically, you know, that would be helpful for me, and I imagine the rest of the collaborative to do so. The other piece about publicizing and advertising about when the test becomes available, to encourage minorities to take part in the test, I would encourage that we, instead of spending those funds internally to our city, that we also look to the larger cities, the larger metropolises in the state and neighboring states where the population is also increased. Because the concern, as we're talking about it, is not that we can't get enough qualified minorities to score high and do well on the test, because they do. They're just in other larger municipalities, you know. So, you know, that's another piece too, that there are officers, that folks that are already on the force that will consider coming to Binghamton, you know, to make that a change for other reasons. I'm not sure, but there's more than one way to do it.
I'm just going to jump in for a second. We've hired a lot of people, both minorities and not, from outside the area, and we train them and they leave. They go back home. That's been our experience over a number of years. We've trained them. I can name a few right off the bat, but we've trained a lot. They go through the academy, they get their time in, they go back home. And so that creates a problem. You know, when trying to hire somebody from outside the area, we used to open up our testing statewide. And when we did that, we lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in training, because people were coming here getting trained, and then 3-4 years they're leaving. They're leaving and going back where they came from, which, you know, you can understand it. That's where their family is. They come here, they have to live here. Yep, I'm going to move here. I'm going to rent an apartment. And then they stay a couple years and they pack their bags and leave. And that's just a reality of, you know, what we're dealing with. Obviously, we have to attract more people. And right now is a very poor time. I don't have to tell you that, Nicole, trying to get the Black community, those people in the schools. You know, we're recruiting every day with those SROs. There's such a, you know, all we get is good feedback from the school and the students, their relationship with those SROs. So I think there's, you know, we are starting at a younger age. You're in the middle schools. But once again, now the perception is, you know, the last test, we're going to have another one. We just got notified, short notice. The state always has in September. It's going to be May 15th. Starting in March, there's a 4-week period, and that's all the state will allow us to sign people up. And so that's time in our hands. That's not our decision. That's all state civil service. So, you know, we're trying, but right now it's harder than ever to recruit minorities, as you can imagine.
Nicole, let's allow you to continue speaking there. And then once you're finished up, we can move on to the next person.
So again, I just want to, you know, reiterate to folks that, you know, if change is something that we need to make, right, we have to think about it differently. So if there was something that you did before and it didn't work, what can be tweaked or done to make a change, right? There might be an incentive, because again, if resources was a concern, right, we're talking about new money to invest in something that we care about, whether that's adding more folks to the people of color and diversifying the police force, if it's training our officers in a way that they can work more inclusively with communities of color, whatever that is, there is something that was not done before or not considered, and we have to do that. We have to think about what that looks like, you know, because I know, you know, this is what I do for the university. It's a difficult thing to get people to come and stay here, right? I get it. I really, really do, right? But you have to think about it differently, and where can we put incentives in place, especially when there's new money on the table. So, you know, if there's new money on the table to do something differently, I'm saying we have to think a little more strategically about how to do it differently. So those are the things to keep in mind as we're strategizing.
Okay, thank you. Mario Williams, you've been very patient. Bishop Williams, floor is yours.
Yes, that's a gift. Hey, good afternoon to you, everyone. I'm just so thankful to be a part of this steering committee, and I'm part of the Sheriff's Department steering committee as well. And I've sat back and listened attentively to what the advocacy groups had to say and what each and every one is proposing and saying. I want to go back to the diversity thing because I knew it was an issue and it was a concern that was going to be brought up again. And I want to commend Officer Davis and Charpinski, Bob, for doing such an awesome job and the limited time that they had to do the training. It's a very important issue and concern throughout our community, especially living in such a diverse population. The thing that comes to my mind, though, is about the training that's required by the Binghamton Police Department and the Broome County Sheriff's Department, annual training that is a requirement, and that training that is identified throughout the calendar year. I was still seeking some answers for that. And also the cultural diversity training, which I raised up a long time ago for our community. Is it something that's mandatory for the officers to attend? Because my thing was, I brought up also about a quota. We know that they have a civil service exam and they take the highest score from that. But back in the day, when I started working for the state of New York, they had to fill a quota. There had to be a certain amount of minorities in the police force, fire department, things of that nature. I know things probably have changed since then. But the other thing that comes to my mind is we have two individuals here, Officer Sammy Davis and Nicole Johnson, that are very qualified and capable of doing the cultural diversity training. And they can identify with the community and as well with the officers in our community. And so I know that at one time, I think independent agencies were coming in to do that training, but doesn't the BPP or the Broome County Sheriff's Department, Human Resource or Personnel Department have that requirement in their training to do the training? Because even if we're not capable of hiring more minority officers or females or people, transgenders, still our officers need to be trained on how to deal with this diverse population. And that seems to be the issue right now. So that's my comment and question, I guess.
Mayor, do you want to jump in on the city's response?
Sure. Mario, as far as I mean, your question is focused primarily on training and cultural competency.
Yes.
Right, as I understand it, and I think when we met as part of the pastors group, you know, that's something that you have, you know, always maintained as a priority as well. And so I think what we have, you know, what we're hearing from the community, you know, for a long period of time is that you want more of a focus on this particular area. And so you know, we are supportive, you know, of that. It's just a matter of how do we, you know, come up with the best ways, you know, to kind of, you know, implement, you know, all of this. And, you know, I think what the chief and I have maintained, you know, from the very beginning is that we'll make the resources, you know, available to this. But, you know, we're going to need some help from the outside on, you know, with folks that are more on the front lines of this, you know, what are some of the either the specific individuals or criteria that's already in place that, you know, we'd like to see, you know, advanced in Binghamton. I think it's if there's a silver lining to it, it's that, you know, normally the challenge is the other way around, where, you know, there's not enough money or resources to implement these sorts of things. Here we're saying, you know, we're making a commitment to provide those sort of those sort of tools and resources to be available. I don't know if that helps, shape what you were, the question that you had.
Yeah, it did, Mayor David, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I think I wanted to take it a step further because I see here and I hear here, Nicole Johnson and Officer Sammy Davis, and even myself would be very capable and qualified to come in and do some cultural diversity training if the department already doesn't have that set up. When I worked for the state of New York in the personnel department, human resources was, they were required to provide that training automatically annually. And then in my individual department, I was required to offer specific training annually, along with things that I identified throughout the calendar year that were issues that I feel that we need to do additional training as well. And I think to build the community relationship better with the different advocacy groups and the people is to show that we're working. I'm just advocating because Nicole knows this community. Officer Sammy Davis knows this community. These people are very passionate. And I think it would build some trust, with the community and the police forces. So I think that's what I'm looking for, is this an independent agencies that you're calling in to come in and do these services that don't really probably know too much about our community, as well as the individuals that we got on these committees that live here.
Sure. So I think you raised some interesting points. So let's kind of peel the layers back a little bit. I think one of the criteria or factors that we're discussing has to do with what the state, the state sets some standards that all municipalities have to follow with regards to training. And that's, I think, what Sam and Bob are talking about with regards to X amount of hours per year on a specific topic, so that there's some standards that are set for training, across the state. And those are typically done through in-service training, or there are things that are done at the police academy. And then there's another layer that's separate from that about, diversity training in general. Sometimes that's done through in-service. Sometimes there's the option of bringing individuals out from the outside. And I think, what Nicole is saying is that her lens is it's important to bring in people from the outside and not having the police train the police on certain areas where we're looking to make improvement. And what you're saying is that there are several local individuals, as well, that have experience in this area. So we want to make sure that we don't kind of merge all of these things in together. We're talking about very specific points, which are all valid and all important, and can all be part of one broader comprehensive plan. And I think what you're suggesting is, there's a lot of local individuals here that have relationships with the community, have relationships with the police, that could play a role in building trust among local communities. And that is something that I agree with. I think that's a valid point, and we should be looking to flesh that out as part of the broader plan, which also can include bringing someone in from the outside, as Nicole has indicated, that really focuses on analytics and has experiences with different departments, large and small, or focuses on this not just with police departments but with institutions in general. So I think there's a lot of things that we could do.
Thank you, Pastor Williams.
Thank you.
Before we get to Deb Hogan, the other thing you brought up, Pastor, is regarding the city being able to deviate from state civil service. That is not something that we can do. A city such as Syracuse for the last 40 years has had what's called a consent decree from the U.S. Department of Justice, which allows them to hire not based on certain civil service rules. But that was something that was put in place based on potentially discriminatory practices of the past. Deborah, if you'd like to unmute yourself, the floor is yours.
Can you raise the hand? I'm going after her. I'm going to make an announcement. I got to get out of here. Yeah.
Deb, we can hear if you'd like to speak.
Can I ask a question at some juncture, Jared?
Yeah, why don't we do this? Because it looks like Deborah's having an issue with her microphone. We'll go to Councilman Burns. He's had his hand up for a while. Then we can go back to you. Go ahead, Councilman.
Hey, Jared.
Yep. We might have lost Councilman Burns. So why don't we go to Mike Baker?
Jared, hold on one second. My apologies, Mike. Listen, I have to go. This has ran a little bit longer than I anticipated. All I can say is, Nicole, Bishop Williams, if in the future, if you want to organize something for training together, I'm all about it. I'm all about it. So I'm willing to work with you. So just reach out. Thank you very much. I hope everybody asked me what they would like to. Listen, we're all in this together, so I'm always supportive. So thank you.
Thanks for everything you're doing, Sam.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Sam. But Jared, let's stay on. Let's keep Bob there. At least if Councilman Burns asks something that we're able to answer, let's make sure that we do that. And if Mike Baker, is able to ask a question as well, if Bob or the chief or myself, just let's at least make sure that people have a chance to ask the questions. And if not, if we don't have the information, we can make sure that we provide it to them.
Okay, Councilman Burns, I think you're up.
Yeah, hi. I just, thank you both of our folks for being there. I'm just wondering, they said they liked the county plan, and I'm just wondering what it is was there any major change that they liked? What did they like about the plan from the county? Just in general, or if there was any one big thing.
I guess I think I can answer that, and I'm not speaking is I really think that we got the people in the community really started talking, and it took a couple of meetings, and it was a great perspective. And I think the one takeaway, at least from the county level, is the willingness to not let this just die or let this end once our homework assignment is done, but to revisit this on a timely basis. So I think that would be the one major takeaway that I think was the most important thing coming out of the county plan.
Okay. And Mike, if you want to roll into your comment or question, as you were next.
Yeah, I think maybe Bishop Williams already did, but I just was curious, to what extent when it comes to hiring criteria, does that come from the state as opposed to local decisions?
Much of our hands are tied. And I mean, Chief Zukoski, if can elaborate, I think, on what our process is, because it's not just obviously, what we hire off the civil service test. There's, an agility test, a psychological test. There's a very in-depth process that, police administration does to interview every single candidate. And then once that process is done, it comes up to the mayor's office, and I will interview those same candidates independently of police administration, because I have a different lens that, I look through and things that I want to convey to the recruits as well. But I think that, in general, people have a perception that whether it's the mayor, the chief, or the city, you can just hire whomever you want to hire for a police officer, firefighter, and a whole host of other positions at City Hall. And if the departments, aren't reflective of the diversity of the community, it's because the person at the top, makes it that way and chooses not to, hire. And of course, nothing could be further from the truth on that. We have a civil service test, the same that the county has, and for every open position, you have to look at the top 3 highest scores. And we recognize that there are barriers in that civil service process that exists. And so what we've done is to try to, for lack of a better description, come up with workarounds to increase diversity, gender diversity, ethnic diversity, et cetera. And some of the things that we've outlined, earlier today. It is a challenge that exists for police departments, across the nation. A lot of us don't like the fact that our hands are tied. I'd like there to be more of a residency requirement than there is currently right now. I mean, whether it's, the police department or anybody that has to work for a municipality for a whole host of reasons. But a lot of this is dictated by New York State civil service law, and the city, could be held in violation if we, just do whatever we want to do. So, that being said, that's where we have to just acknowledge the reality of how the process works at the state level. and then have some conversations about what do we do about it? How do we increase recruitment? How do we go about making the department, more diverse? Because as I said, that is a common goal of people inside and outside of City Hall, and you will not hear anyone at any level disagree with that.
Just a follow-up question for perhaps Officer Bob Charpinski. I made our office go through regular implicit bias training, and I've got very close with Myrna Santiago, who teaches on that, whose husband is an NYPD sergeant. And I asked her about if she'd be willing to do any trainings up here. And she had indicated to me that either through DCJS is that certain trainers are contracted to do the training. I know that came up with Ms. Johnson about bringing in different people. I mean, I was honored to be part of the BPD training last year, but to what extent are your hands tied in bringing in people? Is there a contract like Myrna had indicated to me?
If you're looking to get specific certification for your individuals, then they will have to be a New York State DCJS certified instructor in that topic right there. But as far as if you want to bring them in from an outside the agency to your department, you can. That's something that we've talked with the chief and the mayor about, bringing that individual on up here.
Okay. No, it just, Myrna had indicated to me, because I told her about the great training program you run and whether she might be interested when you and I were discussing topics. And she seemed to think that there was a contract in place through DCJS for implicit bias training for police.
Mike, I'll jump in there. We've had, correct me, Bob, you're training in implicit bias training, correct?
Yes, sir.
What she's talking about, Mike, is that the state will bring on contract with experts such as she is. I don't know who she is, but then they will hold a big training session offered to the local police departments. And what they call is train to trainer, a lot of it. So we have, I don't know, Bob, is it 2 or 4 implicit bias trainers certified to train other officers? So
okay,
they contract with individuals in that expertise to provide the training to all the municipals. Right now, it's webinars, with all the Zoom and COVID stuff.
Yeah.
Other times there's conferences where there's 200 people there. So she's probably contracted with the state. The training Bob got might have very well got from her, and they push it out to the local departments.
Okay, thanks, Chief.
I'm not sure if Deborah is on, if she can try again to unmute and address the group.
Jared, can you hear me?
You're breaking up quite a bit, but we can hear you.
Thank you for the opportunity. As most of you know, I'm a Center City resident. In the mid-1990s, which was under then Mayor Bucci, my neighborhood was ravished with drugs and prostitution. What I learned and was reach out was Michelle Berry, who was then employed in the mayor's office and invited me to attend the Citizens Police Academy. I cannot tell you as a resident how beneficial that was. Now, for circumstances because of the renovations and that at City Hall, Lieutenant Bidwell just made a presentation to our Community Development Advisory Commission that they're looking to reinstitute that correctly, because what that allowed me to do is to be a student not only of City Hall but of the police department. They went through each and every department, and we had a lecture. I think we met for 6 or 8 weeks, once or twice a week, and that information was absolutely crucial. Because what that allowed us as citizens is to learn about the department, but then we put a face to that badge, so that if we had questions or concerns, we would invite them to our neighborhood watch meetings, to, let's say, our Easter egg hunts or National Night Out. And that's part of the community policing, where you take the police out of the station and you bring the residents out of their homes and you get together. Now, granted, we're in a different time right now where everything seems to be electronic and Zoom, but I was so encouraged, and I would really encourage my fellow steering committee member Nicole, once that becomes available, please take advantage of that. It was absolutely crucial. Again, under Mayor Bucci, had the opportunity to bring almost $1 million grant through the Department of Justice under the Center City Read and Seed Initiative. We're had some of those same discussions, and I really encourage us to dust off the booklets and the materials that we had. One of the things was creating mentorships for young people who were interested in taking the civil service exam. You cannot diversify your police force until those young people take that exam. And having seen or been a part of the committees that helped foster that test prep, I was also in another capacity as a testing proctor at that civil service exams, and I was not seeing people of color taking those exams. So until that changes and the ideas that were talked about, outreach to the school, outreach to the churches, we may have those people to set in those desks to take those tests, pass, and become members of our community with a great career. So that's just speaking from a residential perspective, a person who has taken the Citizen Police Academy many times, as Lieutenant Charpinski can attest to, and also doing those ride-alongs. When you're in the police car and you're, in essence, cruising the streets, you may have a traffic stop. Some other classmates had more interesting evenings, as they would say, but it allowed us to almost, in essence, walk in their shoes for that 3 to 4 hours and understand what it takes to be an officer on our streets. I think we are asking for change, but we also need to be students and learn about our department and to be able to participate. Though, just wanted to say thank you, and just maybe Lieutenant Bidwell, if you want to do a plug for the academy coming up. I think this committee would be well served by that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. We're at about hour and 45 minutes here. I don't know if anyone has any final questions for Training Officer Charpinski. As has been stated before, this video will be uploaded to the city's YouTube channel. Bob was certainly copied in on some of the correspondence from before, so if anything comes up, you can answer any questions if there's specifics that you'd like to share with him. As a reminder, we're having a collaborative stakeholder meeting at 6:30 Wednesday evening. That's tomorrow night at 6:30. Everyone's received the Zoom invite. Mayor David will be going over some next steps in the short term and medium term as part of the collaborative, and we look forward to seeing everyone there. Bob, thank you so much for your time today, and certainly we'll pass it along to Sam Davis as well.
Thank you all. I really appreciate the time and the opportunity to be here.
Thanks, everyone.